Welcome, everyone. I am Tamara Blake Wallace, Planning Commission Administrator. This meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting, allowing for both virtual and in-person participation. Serving as moderator tonight is Christine Goldsmith, our Planning Commission Development Review Coordinator, who will now go over the rules and etiquette for this meeting. Christine.
Good evening. I'm Chris Goldsmith, and I will be moderating this evening. This meeting is being recorded on both video and audio for record-keeping purposes. For those attending virtually or on your phone, please keep yourself muted to ensure no interruptions to the evening. If asked to speak and you're attending on your phone, you can mute and unmute yourself by using the phone's designated mute button or by pressing *6. If you're on a computer, you can mute and unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone or mute button on the toolbar in the bottom left of your screen. You can also mute and unmute by using keyboard shortcuts. That would be press Alt-A on a Windows computer, or for a Mac, you would use Command-Shift-A. When questions or comments are requested of the public, those attending in person will be asked to speak first, and those virtually will speak after. If you're attending via phone and would like to ask a question or make a comment when asked, please use the raise hand function, *9, and you will be called upon in turn to identify yourself for the record and speak. If you're attending virtually and would like to ask a question or make comment, please go to the chat icon on your Zoom page and type your comment into that section. Finally, please say your name every time you speak for the benefit of those calling in who cannot see you.
Thank you, Chris. I will now turn the floor over to the chair to bring the meeting to order.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for the Calvert County Planning Commission's October 19th, 2022 regular meeting. My name is Maria Bueller, and as chair of this board, I will now call this meeting to order. We'll begin with roll call. Vice Chair Kernan.
Here.
Commissioner Freeland.
Here.
Commissioner Toohey.
Here.
Commissioner Dr. Holler.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Jones is unable to be with us this evening. If you could all please stand with me, we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
For the next item, we have action on the proposed agenda.
Commissioners, any changes?
Motion to approve this evening's agenda.
Second.
Madam Chair, I do have one change. Just for clarification. Item 8D, it should be the Fox Run Boulevard Prince Frederick request from the requirement for site plan approval prior to the issuance of a grading permit as provided by the Prince Frederick zoning ordinance in Chapter 12. Chapter 1, I'm sorry.
Chapter 1. All right, does your motion still stand with that change?
Yes.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan, seconded by Commissioner Toohey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
All right.
Next item on the agenda is item 4, action on the proposed summary of actions. We have one item, item 4A, the September 21st, 2022 regular meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan, second by Commissioner Toohey. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I will abstain from this one.
And one abstention. All right, thank you. Motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is item 5, recognitions of persons attending the meeting. Tonight from Planning and Zoning, we have Mary Beth Cook, Director. Virtually, we have Judy Makel, Deputy Director of Zoning. We have Carolyn Sunderland, Deputy Director of Planning. Jenny Plummer-Walker, Long Range Planner. Kat Lockwood, Planner 1. Rachel O'Shea, Zoning Planner. Christine Fenimore, Principal Planner. Colleen Anglin, Environmental Planner 2. From Park and Rec, we have Shannon Nazal, Director. From Public Works, we have Carrie Dull, Director. We have J.R. Cosgrove, Deputy Director of Capital Projects. We have Jason Leavitt, Project Engineer. Public Safety, Fire and Rescue EMS, we have James Richardson, Division Chief, and we have Stanley Harris, Emergency Communications Chief. From the Sheriff's Office, we have Captain Brent Parrott. Also in attendance, we have our Legal Counsel, John Mattingly, and our Recording Clerk, Becky Parkinson. Next item on the agenda is item 6, applications for site plan review and action. We have item 6A, Cspr 138320, Calvert Gateway, Lot 11, Tax Map 6, Parcel 448. It's Zone Town Center, which is Dunkirk. Conceptual Site Plan Category 1. Christine?
Thank you, Tamara. Evening, Commissioners. My name is Christine Fenimore, Principal Planner with Planning and Zoning, and I'll be presenting the site plan for project CSPR 138320, Calvert Gateway Lot 11, Business Center. If you can advance the next slide. Thank you. Lot 11 is located on Town Center Boulevard off Ward Road in Dunkirk Town Center. Here you see a portion of the tax map, of course with the site highlighted. Next slide. This map shows the 2022 aerial photography of the site and surrounding area. If you see Dunkirk District Park is labeled, as well as Ward Farm Park, Ward Road to the south of the site, and of course to the west is Maryland Route 4. The property is zoned Town Center. Next slide, please. The conceptual site plan was accepted for review by the Technical Evaluation Group in July of 2021 at the TEG meeting, and review comments were discussed at the August 2021 TEG meeting. This presentation is based on Plan Number 2. The proposed development is for a 10,395 square foot, one-story retail building and associated site improvements. Lot 11 is a total of 2.66 acres. The front building setback is 50 feet, and that pertains to the frontage along Ward Road as well as Town Center Boulevard. The parking setback is 20 feet for the side, rear, and front. And there is a 10-foot setback off of the, it's hard to see on this plan, non-tidal wetland buffer, which acts as the rear setback. Of course, the green that you see there is basically the lot, with the exception of the parking, sidewalk, and building area, which is also in color. Whoop. No, go back. Thank you. The site has frontage on Town Center Boulevard and Ward Road, as I just said, both of which are public rights-of-way. The vehicular access is proposed via one access point off of Town Center Boulevard. Sidewalk is proposed along the property frontage of Ward Road and Town Center Boulevard, as well within the site along the front, side, and rear of the building to accommodate building access from the parking lot. 43 parking spaces are required and 45 are being provided. That includes 2 handicap accessible spaces. Of course, before you tonight is the conceptual site plan, which is step 1 of a 3-step process. Keep that in mind. A landscaping plan is required to be submitted for review with the detailed site development plan and must meet all requirements in the county zoning ordinance, section 6-5. A photometric plan is also required to be submitted at the same time for review by planning staff as part of the detailed site development plan. We are in Town Center in Dunkirk, so architectural review is required. Adequate public facilities. A certified traffic impact analysis, also known as a TIA, is required prior to final detailed site development plan approval. The property has access to private water and sewer as part of the Calvert Gateway Center. The project is non-residential in use, therefore APF for schools does not apply. Environmental, I'll cover briefly as well. There are no wetlands, streams, or buffers within the limits of disturbance as proposed. There are non-tidal wetlands and associated wetland buffer on the lot and within close proximity to the proposed development, but at this time, there are no impacts to those buffers proposed. A wetland delineation was performed when the site was graded originally with the Calvert Gateway Center. No wetland delineation was prepared for the current development plan. Forest conservation requirements of the zoning ordinance, section 8-3, were previously addressed at the time of subdivision approval for Calvert Gateway. There's on-site forest retention recorded within that subdivision, not just on this lot. There's a tiny bit on this lot. Most of it is adjacent on the parcel to the east. The site is within the Hall Creek watershed. Stormwater management, they do have conceptual stormwater approval from Public Works. That's step one of the three-step process. Further technical review of the stormwater design for the site development is required, and that would happen with the detailed site development plan. Next slide, please. These are the building elevations that were submitted with the conceptual site plan. So the conceptual site plan has been reviewed by TEG agencies. The latest comments are included in your package. Those were on Plan 2. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions. I also want to mention that the project engineer, Nelson Arocha with Bay Engineering, is present to answer any questions on either his behalf or the applicant's behalf.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioners, questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Christine, what were the outstanding conditions on the property that were identified by Maryland Department of Environment?
There, and that is mentioned in the staff report. And Nelson, you may be the better person to answer this. We did receive information from the applicant dated September 15th and is correspondence from MDE regarding a settlement agreement between them and Dunkirk Gateway Business Park Association, Inc., with regards to the private septic.
My name is Nelson Rocha. I'm with Bay Engineering. And to answer your question, Mr. Freeland, the site was required to do mitigation and some corrective measures for the private system. They went through that, repaired it, was reviewed by MDE, and then the work was released or approved, and then now it's been settled.
Christine, do you know, do we monitor water quality in that tributary of Halls Creek that passes by this property? Does the county do any water quality monitoring?
We do non-tidal water quality testing. I am not the person to speak details to that. It's not in my wheelhouse, and I've not been involved. So I can take the question under advisement and get back to you.
Yeah, I'd like
I
to
think
know
the answer is yes, but other than that, I don't have any information.
Halls Creek is a major sub-watershed that is south of Dunkirk and the shopping center. Certainly the runoff moves in that direction, so it would be interesting to know if the county is monitoring the water quality of Halls Creek and what the condition of that water quality is.
Noted.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Questions? Is there anyone from the public that wanted to make comment on this item?
No,
Or on, and none on Zoom?
no, ma'am.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we approve with staff recommended conditions as listed above.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tui, a second by Commissioner Kernan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Christine. Next on the agenda, long-range planning. Item 7A, Calvert County Comprehensive Plan Proposed Amendments, Town Center Expansions. Jenny?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
This
evening.
is a very short update. I've given presentations to the Planning Commission in August, September, and now October. This is on the county's proposed comprehensive plan amendments and the proposed elimination or reduction of the expansions for 4 of the town centers. As I've previously mentioned, the Board of County Commissioners met with staff twice in June in work sessions and directed staff to start the process for doing the proposed amendments. At your August meeting, you directed staff to send out the amendments for agency review and giving the agencies at least 60 days advance notice of the public hearing. Staff sent the request out for comments to the State Clearinghouse. The Maryland Department of Planning State Clearinghouse is responsible for distributing those to the state agencies. And then we sent them to our adjoining jurisdictions and then our regular list of local agencies. And then posted it on the website for the public to be aware of. The Planning Commission's public hearing is scheduled for November 2nd here at Harriet Elizabeth Brown at 7 o'clock. Since the memo has been written, in addition to staff presenting the proposed amendments to the Economic Development Advisory Commission and the Solomon's Architectural Review Committee, we have also presented to the Huntingtown Architectural Review Committee, Lusby and Prince Frederick Architectural Review Committees, and sent the presentation slides to both St. Leonard and Owings for their review. I would like to note that the 4 town centers that are proposed to change in the adopted 2019 County Comprehensive Plan are Huntingtown, where the proposal is to eliminate the expansion. For Solomon's, it would eliminate the expansion in its entirety. And then for Prince Frederick, it would reduce the expansion significantly to basically the phase 1 with a sliver here and a sliver there for snapping boundaries and including the parcel, or the piece of the parcel that's on the east side of Stafford Road and Prince Frederick Boulevard. And then for Lusby, it retains the expansion to the northeast of the town, but eliminates that potential future expansion between Lusby and Solomon's. In your packet for the public hearing, I will be including the comments we've received from agencies and then also the public through October 14th, and then we'll provide you with the comments that received between then and November 1st. Anyone that wishes to provide comments after close of business of November 1st needs to bring them to the public hearing to hand deliver them. That concludes my presentation. Dr. Holler.
Yeah, I think for clarity, since this is an issue that the public's going to comment on, the labeling that we're currently using says town center expansions. And I think that your presentation clearly says that's not the case. We're not expanding. We're reducing them. And I think before that is used with the public for the advertisement of the meeting and that sort of thing, I think some other title that more nearly reflects what's happening ought to be chosen.
Good point.
We can certainly make that change to what we're going forward. The legal ad has already been published, so anything what we can put up on the website to clarify that it is the reduction or elimination of the expansions for 4 of the town centers. The ones that are not, there's no changes proposed, are Dunkirk, Owings,
Right.
and St. Leonard. There's no further questions. I look forward to seeing you on November 2nd.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Next on the agenda is item 8, items for discussion and/or action. We have 6 items tonight. The first item, 8A, Department of Planning and Zoning. Text Amendment Case TA 2203, amendments to the Calvert County zoning ordinance to allow for possible cemetery accessory uses. Rachel?
Good evening, Planning Commission. Rachel O'Shea, zoning planner with the Department of Planning and Zoning. This evening, I have two text amendments to review with you, the first being 22-03. An application was received by Planning and Zoning from the Chesapeake Memorial Gardens requesting that crematoriums and funeral homes be permitted as accessory uses to existing cemeteries. The applicant reasons that funeral homes and crematoriums are related uses to cemeteries and are businesses that are low intensity and have minimal impact to surrounding properties. I would also like to remind the Planning Commission members, as stated last month, prior to the zoning ordinance update in 2006, crematoriums and funeral homes were permitted by special exception in the district of what is now the Farm and Forest District, and that was removed through the 2006 update. This is the location of the Chesapeake Highlands Memorial Gardens off of Brooms Island Road, about half a mile off of Route 4. And this slide is showing the existing zoning in the use charts for crematoriums, funeral homes, and cemeteries or memorial gardens. And then in red, this is the proposed text amendment to add an SC for special exception for the Farm and Forest District with the conditions for crematorium, and this is already existing. The crematorium shall be accessory to funeral home, and then adding the condition for funeral homes that the funeral home shall be accessory to an existing public cemetery as the adoption of the ordinance. So tonight we're here to review agency comments received. We did receive comments from the Office of the County Attorney for this text amendment. They recommended a definition to distinguish private versus public cemeteries, since that was included in the proposed condition. Staff did go ahead and draft a definition to be added as part of the text amendment to Article 12 definitions. A public cemetery is one used by the general community, a neighborhood, or a church, while a private cemetery is one used only by a family or a small portion of the community. However, actual public use rather than ownership determines whether a cemetery is public. So with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission members discuss the text amendment as well as comments received, and direct staff if to move forward with scheduling a joint public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions or comments? Did we have anyone from the public or on Zoom?
No hands seen.
Motion to direct staff to schedule a joint public hearing. The Board of County Commissioners.
I have a motion by Commissioner Freeland and a second by Commissioner Tui. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Next up is 8B, Department of Planning and Zoning, Text Amendment Case TA 2204, amendment to the Calvert County zoning ordinance to allow Cigar Lounge in the Lusby Town Center.
Okay, so we'll move on to 22-04. Planning staff received a text amendment application from Mr. Lincoln Lawrence requesting the use of a cigar lounge be added to the Lusby Town Center use chart as a separate use and be permitted within the town center. The applicant states that within the town center and within proximity to the proposed cigar lounge, there's a liquor store and a restaurant and bar. The applicant stated that the current ordinance does not lend to this type of business model and is growing throughout the Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia areas, and that this proposed change will allow for growth of these types of businesses in the Lusby area of the county. This use is already permitted within the village commercial and the village ed sub-districts, but not in the sub-district where the lounge is being proposed. And this is a map showing the proposed location off of Town Square Drive. And just to review, this is a map of the Lusby Town Center showing the location of the sub-districts. You can see that the neighborhood commercial is kind of split into 3 separate zones surrounding the village commercial sub-district. This slide is showing the existing Lusby Town Center use chart. You'll see down at the bottom of the chart, use number 22 is the tavern, nightclub, lounge, and dance hall with or without outdoor facilities. So the proposed text amendment is to add a P for permitted to that category that would include lounge for the cigar lounge under neighborhood commercial subdistrict. So agency comments received. As discussed at the last Planning Commission meeting, there was concern about smoke affecting the other businesses, since this would be located within a building, a shared building. And I did contact the health department and asked if they could please submit comments, and they did. The Division of Environmental Health sent an email stating that the Calvert County Health Department, in cooperation with the Maryland Department of Health, enforces the Clean Indoor Air Act. The CIAA prohibits smoking in indoor areas open to the public with following exceptions, one being a retail tobacco business that is sole proprietorship, limited liability company, corporation, partnership, or other enterprise in which 1, the primary activity is the retail sale of tobacco products and accessories, and 2, the sale of other products is incidental. The full email with the rest of the information from the health department is included in your packet. So with that, staff recommends the Planning Commission review and discuss the text amendment and the agency comments received, and direct staff if to schedule a joint public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Do we have a definition of how the primary activity is used? There was some discussion at last month's meeting that food and alcohol would be served at this establishment. And in my experience, tobacco sales in a food and alcohol establishment are a very minor part of it, not the primary business. When I had a bar, I had a cigarette machine, and it accounted for less than 1% of my gross revenue, and it was very, very small. They're going to be able to drink and eat there also, and smoke?
The applicant is proposing snacks as well as beverages, and I think they are going to pursue the sale of alcohol as well. For this definition, it would be more than 50% of their sales would have to be from the cigar or tobacco related products, and that the other sales would not be, the majority. But we don't necessarily, beyond that point, regulate that.
Okay, but I assume that's the liquor board that does the 50%, or do you know?
No, I mean, that's part of the reason why we're doing this text amendment, is that it to be considered a lounge in that category is alcohol sales. And if they were just doing the sale of tobacco, that would just go under retail and would be fine. But since they're linking the two together and it goes under the category definition for lounge, that's why we're requiring the text amendment.
And if they just did the tobacco, would they be allowed to smoke in that area, in that building? Okay, so you could smoke in anywhere that is selling tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
as long as that's what their primary business. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Rachel, we spent some time with this last month. At what point, and you said snacks, at what point do the snacks move into an area where it's an actual meal, and then it's an actual restaurant, and then something else falls into place? That's a question I have, so, but you don't have the answer, I know, so, do you?
I don't think at that point there is a line. They're permitted for both.
Okay. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Mary Beth Cook, Director of Planning and Zoning. The Environmental Health Department has a environmental health department worker that does food service. So they have very strict regulations. So if they just want to serve snacks, they would fall under one category. If they want to be a restaurant, they would follow under another category. So what Rachel presented tonight would all be regulated by the health department.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Is there anyone from the public or on Zoom?
I have 2 hands raised.
All right.
All right, Mr. Cormier, you may unmute and speak, sir.
Good afternoon, commissioners and staff. My name is Joseph Cormier from Owings, Maryland. I am concerned about this type of business being, the zoning being changed to allow for this, and not just the sale of alcohol and food in the same establishment, but in many neighboring counties that have smoking lounges, they have a BYOB policy. So I don't know what's going to stop people from going to Mike Hart's liquor store, picking up a handle of something, and then going and smoking a cigar and drinking their fill with no one to cut them off. So I think that we need to be very, if we're going to change the zoning laws to allow this, we need to be very clear about the expectations are going to be for this business owner before they open this up. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rachel, if they have a lounge, then they have to have a liquor license, right? Because it's a liquor selling establishment.
Yes, if they're selling liquor, they have to have a liquor license.
Okay, so then they will not be allowed to bring in liquor from elsewhere. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair. I have J.C. Hooker. You may unmute and speak.
Thank you. Commissioners, my concern this evening is that if this is to be passed, we're looking at the environmental department, we're looking at the health department. But I say to you all this evening, when will we start looking at our comprehensive plan and stop making exceptions to our plan? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, for text amendment 22-04, recommend we send this out to, set it up for joint public hearing.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Commissioner Holler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. I'm sorry? You want to you want to redo a roll call vote?
Let's do that, yeah.
Okay. Vice Chair Kernan?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeland?
Aye.
Commissioner Toohey?
Nay.
Commissioner Dr. Holler?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Next item on the agenda is item 8C, proposed Chapter 3 of the Calvert County Code, Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. Mary?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Mary Beth Cook, Director of Planning and Zoning. I have several representatives from various departments here this evening to talk about their section, and sitting with me right now is Director Dahl from Public Works. We're going to begin with a discussion on the current adequate public facilities. They're currently housed in the Calvert County Zoning Ordinance in Section 7-105. And as you can read, before the the Planning Commission can grant final approval of a residential subdivision or residential development. You have to find that these projects are have adequate facilities for roads and schools. The adequate public facilities regulations were adopted in the county in 1988, and from 1988 to 2002, they were in the subdivision regulations, which was a separate document. They were adopted into the zoning ordinance in 2003, and that's where they are contained today. The amendments for adequate public facilities for schools were done in 2003, 2008, and 2018. Minor edits have also been made for roads. So currently, the schools only applies to residential developments, but we're proposing to expand the adequate public facilities, and these regulations, if adopted, will include non-residential developments such as commercial, industrial, and institutional. In 2019, with the adoption of the comprehensive plan, there was an action to expand the adequate public facilities regulations to include water and sewer, storm drain, solid waste, public safety, and law enforcement services. We also, when we started meeting with all of the departments to discuss this, added parks. We met with the Board of County Commissioners several times, most recently in June and October of 2002, and are working through work sessions to get a good, solid draft. So this evening, we'll be presenting to you some of those regulations as they currently stand. And if, once adopted, if any of one of these categories, existing or proposed, is found to be inadequate, the development cannot start construction until capacity becomes adequate. So the adequate public facilities for schools are not proposed to be changed. We're leaving them as they currently are. We're just moving them out of the Calvert County zoning ordinance into the county code, because there's going to be such an expansion, and any changes that would have to be made would be made as amendments to the county code instead of the Calvert County zoning ordinance. So we're going to move on to the adequate public facilities for roads, and Carrie's going to discuss those.
Good evening, everybody. Carrie Dahl, Director of Public Works. So the existing current adequate public facility for roads is actually a level C outside of the town centers, and it's D within the town centers. That has not changed much. If I would go to the next slide, the inadequacy piece of this, I'd like to bounce around this so we can understand what we're talking about, and then we'll talk about the other things that we're actually doing to mitigate some of these things, so we set the conditions for actual traffic flow within the county. The inadequacy is to make it an E or an F. Okay, anything that's E or F is not something that we want to see, so we want to mitigate down from that point forward from there. So if I go back to that, the things that we did not have addressed was in the proposed section, is we start talking about each lane and lane approach for roadways in the impact area will operate at or above the minimum level of service C using a highway capacity method. That was never defined before, so we're adding that. I'd like to add that to it because that was a recommendation that we got from our traffic engineer that came in and actually made the proposal to the commissioners previously just here in October. And then each lane and lane approach for any roadway already operating at levels of service D before impacts from the proposed development shall be no worse as a result of the impacts from the development. Otherwise, if you're coming in and what you're going to put in is going to make it an E, you have to mitigate it down to a D. Okay, so it stays where it supposedly, where it initially started. So you can't make it worse. You can only make it where it was when you first started. So the other thing that we're going to do is the impact studies. The impact studies are currently right now covered in Appendix 20-1, Traffic Impact Analysis, is currently basically trips when a traffic study is required is on 400 basically registered trips in that movements within that area of time, okay? We're going to take that and knock it down to 250. And that way what we're going to do is we're actually going to require more traffic studies to actually measure what the impacts would be on that area. Sometimes, you know, if it's only going to be 400, you'll have to do them at 400, but you'll never notice if it's going to be 250, and there's numerous smaller developments that he's 225 there, He's 200 here, but it's all in the same area. You could be over 400 and not necessarily get a good analysis on that. So that's why we're ratcheting it down to 250 to trip that scale, is what I'm getting at, okay? So moving along, public sewer. We're all very familiar with this one. We discussed this earlier in the year. I will tell you that the 90% that we are saying as proposed inadequacy is probably better than most counties that are out there in the state of Maryland. I've seen them as high as 95, and some of them like high when I'll tell you the truth, most counties don't enumerate this number. They don't, they just talk about flows and things of that nature. It's almost like they talk around it. We're actually gonna enumerate it, call it 90. We actually have to be in, if we have a system that's actually treating water, we have to start a plan at 8% that's directed obviously by a threshold that MDE sets. And you guys are familiar with that because we talked about that previously. So typically that number is 95, we knocked it down to 90. Okay, there was some language in here that talked about adequacy, approaching inadequacy, but we got advice from the county attorney's office to essentially say, just tell me what inadequate is and leave it at that. And right now we're saying it's at 90%. So anything above 90% would be considered inadequate. Any questions on that? Okay, next. So water, we're using the same theory, okay? 90% is the threshold that we're gonna use as being approached inadequacy. We have 19 water systems, and all of them are in pretty good shape when it comes to supplying the water. So 90% is a good accuracy. I think I just took a measurement of Prince Frederick before I came here, just to give you an example. It's at like 60-some%. It's just like it's low 60s when I looked at it, okay? So it's nowhere close to being at 90%. Any questions there? Okay, moving along. So adequate public facilities for stormwater and water drainage. If I had to surmise this, it's as simple as this. When you start the development, okay, there's a condition that it's currently in. If it's green grass, trees, and everything like that, when you actually come in and develop the area, it basically has to convey water at the same rate it would if there is water that needs to be conveyed if it had green grass, trees, and everything. So if you're putting in impervious surfaces of that nature, storm drains, then it basically has to handle the water, okay, at a rate of the same or lower than what you currently started with. And that's essentially what all that language there says. We're actually developing additional language to this that will actually try to articulate that better at this point in time, but that's still under a little bit of staffing. But that is basically where we're going with this when we start talking about stormwater and drainage. Questions? Okay. And then for solid waste, this is all based on the transfer station that's at Appeal. Okay, right now, we say that it would be inadequate if our transfer station started exceeding 70%. We have a number of customers that actually, you know, use and operate out of the transfer station, whether it be commercial, whether it be residential, you name it. And we actually transfer our station, our solid waste from Appeal and take it to the King George super landfill at this present time. So basically our measuring stick is as long as we're below 70%, we're in a good position. And currently right now it depends on what day of the week it is, but we're currently operating anywhere from 50 to 60% at that capacity when it comes to the transfer station. And we are evaluating upgrades to that transfer station as we are right now. So it's something that we're already setting conditions to improve. I believe that's all that I have.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Public Safety. Jim Richardson and Stanley Harris will discuss their sections.
Good evening. Jim Richardson, Division Chief for Fire Rescue EMS. Let's see. Our primary goal for Fire Rescue EMS would be the provision of high-quality fire and EMS service to the citizens. Adequacy of the fire and EMS service would be determined by using response time statistics, which measure the time between the resource being dispatched and their arrival at the scene of an incident. That's typically in direct relation to the distance from a fire and EMS station. Given the rural demographics of Calvert County, response time can also be affected by the availability of resources, particularly when times with EMS, when service demand is excessive or we have significant wait times to transfer patients at the hospital. Additional service response criteria could be considered adequate, would be considered adequate if the standards were being met. Each fire and EMS response area, there are 6 main response areas in Calvert County, are sectioned off into sub-areas known as boxes. These boxes, of which there are 92 throughout Calvert County, are in direct relation to the distance and emergency response travel from each of the 6 primary service areas. The criteria to be applied to the development of commercial, institutional, and industrial and major subdivisions. If the criteria were not to be met, a project could be delayed up to 6 years. Additional consideration could be made if development were to provide EMS service. An example could be a senior or skilled nursing type facility. Okay. Next slide. All right. To go into EMS a little bit more, the emergency medical services, the response time addressing the first due sub-area box areas would be broken down into 2 areas. One would be for basic life support unit, which would be routinely an ambulance equipped with an advanced automatic external defibrillator within 10 minutes. The response time within at least 90% of the incidents dispatched as measured annually. And then the second sub-area would be an advanced life support or paramedic unit, which would be again within 10 minutes. Response time to at least 90% of the incidents as measured annually. The meeting of the 90% time threshold came from GIS mappings from each fire department, from each fire department to their individual first due areas, can reach within 10 minutes almost to the complete perimeter of their areas and exceed sometimes within the posted speed limit plus 10 miles per hour. Note that the majority of the population densities are near where the fire stations are located now. Population density as well as the call volumes are highest where the stations are currently located. For fire, the response criteria is essentially the same, except it would be, instead of obviously an ALS or BLS response, it would be the initial company arriving, again using that 10-minute response threshold within 90% of the incidences. And additionally, we currently have existing fire flow and duration criteria detailed in the County Fire Prevention Code under water supply, and we would look to have that included as part of the adequate public facilities.
Thank you.
Good evening, Stanley Harris, Chief Emergency Communications. So there's no industry standard to take the number of citizens and tell you how many 911 dispatchers and call takers you need. But there are agencies that have staffing models that look at call volume and other things that are going on in your area to make a recommendation for what you need. And one of those agencies is the National Emergency Number Association, or NENA. So we're recommending that it be included that the approved full-time equivalents assigned to take 911 calls and dispatch emergency responders meets or exceeds the FTEs recommended by the NENA staffing tool as amended from time to time. And then the second point is already in COMAR, but we're requesting to add it to the adequate public facilities requirement in Calvert County, that the county has sufficient number of call takers and equipment to consistently answer incoming calls on a daily average of 10 seconds or less. And that is it. Any questions?
What does consistently mean? Is there a percentage or a goal?
So we look at that every year. We take all of our calls for that year, our emergency calls, and we run an average. And for example, like right now we're at 7 seconds is what our average answer time is to answer calls in Calvert County.
And is there a category for how long things take? I mean, to be an average, we have to have things go wrong. So do we know what the worst case scenario is in general?
I do not.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have Captain Parrott for law enforcement.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Evening.
Captain Brent Parrott with the Sheriff's Office. After review of our current residential development applications and census data, the Sheriff's Office law enforcement services are deemed adequate if the projected ratio of sworn law enforcement officers to population is 1.5 deputies per 1,000 residents. At this time, there's no identified commercial growth data to assist with this recommendation. As Calvert County government continues to receive residential or commercial development applications, data used to determine whether the above law enforcement ratio to population can only be gathered upon completion of the projects and its occupancy. The growth generated by any proposed residential subdivision or commercial business may not exceed the service capacity of existing law enforcement officers. Just a little background. The Sheriff's Office responded to approximately 74,000 calls for service last year. We have approximately 168 sworn deputy sheriffs that wear the uniform as I do this evening. And the census in Calvert County is approximately 92,000. So we're at right at about 1.82 sworn law enforcement officers to that 1,000. So we are adequate at this time. And that includes our court deputies in the courthouse. If we have a critical incident or, say, a significant weather event, we could always mobilize those folks as well that are contract deputies in the courthouse. And those are retired folks. We can do different things with them. So we equate them into the equation as well. That's all I have.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Captain, the 1.5 officers.
Yes, sir.
Is that a, I hate to call it an industry, but that's the only term I have. Is that an industry standard?
So, doing research across the nation, agencies use different standards. They'll use as low as one officer per 1,000. I've seen it as high as 3.8. Where we derive that information from is we do a resource allocation study periodically. And there's different data points that we use to come up with that ratio, such as like calls for service, your population, the amount of sworn officers that you have. So there could be any new additional hires that the county commissioners approve or retention hires when folks retire. So we use those, and that will get you that ratio, that 1.5 or 2.0. But it does vary across the country. For example, city type, like D.C., Baltimore, where you have a small geographical area, but you have a high population. That may push that ratio up to as much as 3.5 per 1,000 residents because it's so tight-knit. We're more rural and spread out. But some things that the Sheriff's Office has done we talked about response times with the fire department. It's hard to get a response time for law enforcement because we run so many calls for service. But what we did in the last assessment a few years ago is we actually shrunk the patrol beats. So, for example, when I came on 25 years ago, I mean, it would be nothing to have 3 of us working the whole county back then. But now what we did was as population grew and calls for service increased, we shrunk those patrol beats. So instead of having 3 to 5, we now have 8. So by shrinking the patrol beat, it shrinks the area where the officer's patrolling, which the response time is a lot quicker than if you are responding from Dunkirk, say, to Plum Point Road for an auto accident. Now that deputy responds from Dunkirk to the Split. Now there is cross beat traffic, and what that means is if there are officers in neighboring beats, for example, that have an arrest, that officer in beat 1 may have to cover beat 2, so that stretches out their patrol beat for a little bit. But doing the resource allocation study, that comes up.
Thank you.
That ratio.
Thank you.
Next is park facilities. So we've been working very closely with the county attorney's office, and after consulting with the county attorney, we've decided to defer the park facilities, continue working on it. It's a little bit unique because there aren't as many examples throughout the state and the country. So we're going to continue tweaking this, but we'd like to move forward with the rest of the adequate public facilities regulations at this time and continue working on the park facilities. But Shannon Nazal, Director of Parks and Recreation, is here if you have any questions on what we have thus far.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So it mentions fees in lieu. Is there any indication who sets those fees or what the fees will be?
So at this time, Shannon is all Director of Parks and Recreation. So with fees in lieu, it would be based, if this were going to be part of the APFO, it would be based on potentially a per dwelling unit cost, which at this time has really not been, hasn't been dove into yet at this point. And as we continue research on what might be the most appropriate for adequate public facilities, for park facilities, we'll be able to look further into that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we currently have enough fields for baseball and t-ball and soccer and?
No.
No, okay.
But John knew that, though.
What's that?
You knew that.
Well, I thought it might need to be brought up. Thanks.
So if there's no other questions, we are requesting that the Planning Commission direct staff to schedule the joint public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners so that we can hear public comments.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Madam Chairman.
Sir.
I'm not opposed to the kinds of things we've heard tonight that make a lot of sense. But what worries me is, as recently as the 90s, we had a 12% commercial tax base here. We now have 7%, and it is declining. That means that taxes are going to be higher for homeowners, and also the kind of businesses that are locating here are different, and I don't mean that hierarchically, but they are different in terms of the price of their products and that sort of thing. And I think what you all are doing is laudatory, but I think that has to be looked at, or should be looked at, in terms of, well, what effect is this going to have, further effect on the commercial tax base? Because it would, if we do all of this and our primary result is that nobody comes here in the commercial area, or only those that are very bottom of the heap, I think we've defeated what the citizens would expect from us.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Can I ask Jim Richardson a question? Jim, you mentioned that the firehouses currently are centered around the denser populations of their area. Is that true for all the firehouses?
Basically, can you hear me? Basically, pretty much, with the exception of, I would say their busiest areas and the busiest population densities are closest to where the 6 primary areas are currently. With the exception of Solomon's, theirs is a much larger area. In fact, Solomon's first due area probably attributes to about 30% of the county's entire call volume. So probably almost 2/3 of the entire call volume for the county is Prince Frederick South.
I know that Solomon's is one of the firehouses up for renovation or replacement.
Yes, sir.
Is it necessary to move Solomon's to obtain that sweet spot?
I believe that they are looking at that. They're looking at a potential move north that would allow them to be closer to the center of that first due area. It would provide quicker response time to probably their busier area, which would be the Chesapeake Ranch Estates, as well as still provide adequate service to the Solomon's area.
Would that allow them to close the annex that they currently operate?
Yes, currently the annex is in place to allow for ISO ratings for insurance companies. You have to be within 5 miles of a fire department to be considered covered if your insurance company uses ISO rating. There's a significant portion of the northern area from Solomon's, northern Lusby, I would say, and before you get into, actually way before you get to St. Leonard's, obviously, but where you're beyond 5 miles and actually parts of the ranch club or the ranch estates that have hydrants that are still wouldn't be considered protected. So if that firehouse would be moved, they're looking somewhere north of the Southern Connector Circle on H.T. Truman. It would make it within 5 miles of their entire current first due area.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Jim, while you're here.
Yes.
Do you know why the Solomon's account for such a high percentage of the calls? The population isn't that high, is it?
I don't know the population. I can tell you that, like I said, probably 80 to 85% of our call volume is EMS. We're finding that we're spending a significant amount of time. You know, a single call for the Solomons area probably takes 2 hours. By the time you respond to the scene is the short part. Wrap up the patient, go to the hospital in Prince Frederick, turn around and come back. That's 2 hours for one call. I've jokingly said if I leave Prince Frederick and heading south, if I don't see a Solomon's ambulance, I get a little worried something's not going right. I don't know the population densities per se, but I can tell you the call volume is higher in the southern end of the county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments? Do we have anyone from the public that wishes to comment or on Zoom?
I see no hands.
Did you?
I would like to. I thought he was going to go before me. He was very anxious.
Come on up. If you could just please state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Bob Estes, and I'm speaking for myself, I guess. Some of the adequate public facilities have a kind of what I call easily the 6-year rule. Do all of them have that? You know, schools, you have to remediate after 6 years, and then if you don't, they get to go ahead. Is that true for all of them?
We can put your questions in, but this is just a comment period.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can't ask any questions. Okay.
Oh, no, you can ask it, Bob. We might just not answer it.
Oh, okay. Well, sometimes questions are almost comments, but I get you.
It's being written down.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. And I wasn't sure. Oh, shoot! There's going to be a question. Okay, let me make it a comment.
Go ahead. Go for it.
If I have a problem with it's good that we're reducing the number of units to require a traffic study, but I worry that if you have one that's 200, another one that's 200, another that's 200, you're not requiring a traffic study, but now you're up to 600. So that's a comment. Did better that time. And I'm also worried that in engineering, I'm an engineer, retired, but we never designed things like aircraft to average. We always went to maximum. And I note that the sewer capacity is always stated as 90% of average, and I worry that the maximum could cause problems. I'm not a sewer guy, but I'm worried about not considering maximum. Stormwater management, I'm always worried that we're not designing to the actual current conditions in the county. And those county conditions are actually part of the NOAA database, local database. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Was there anybody on Zoom?
No hands are raised.
All right, commissioners, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to schedule a joint public hearing so that the public can speak on these matters.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tui. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kernan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next on the agenda is item 8D, Fox Run Boulevard, Prince Frederick Town Center. It's in the Newtown Sub-Area District. Request for I'm sorry, this is the one that we changed. This is Fox Run Boulevard, Prince Frederick, request from the requirement for site plan approval prior to the issuance of a grading permit as provided by the Prince Frederick Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 1. And presenting tonight will be Colleen.
Good evening, Commissioners. Colleen Anglin. I'm an environmental planner too with Planning and Zoning Development Review. I'm going to jump around in this slideshow a little bit, so bear with me. But we will be discussing grading permit G7756, which is for the unbuilt portion of Fox Run Boulevard. So you can see here we're discussing the portion that would connect the current intersection with Chesapeake Boulevard all the way down to where Fox Run Boulevard intersects with Dares Beach Road. And as you can see from this map, it's located within the Newtown district of the Prince Frederick Town Center. Staff received a written request from Jason Leavitt, who's a project engineer with Department of Public Works, for an exemption to the Prince Frederick Town Center Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 1, Section A, which states grading and clearing permits may not be issued prior to site plan or subdivision approval. DPW is requesting an exception to allow for the removal of excess fill dirt within and adjacent to the unbuilt section of the right-of-way. This project would expedite the future completion of Fox Run Boulevard, as well as enable DPW to utilize fill dirt on other ongoing county construction projects, which will provide significant cost savings. There are 4 provisions under this section of the Prince Frederick zoning ordinance that allow for an exception. The second provision states that the issues related to the protection of natural features are deemed by the Planning Commission to have been satisfactorily addressed in a pending subdivision plat or site plan. I want to point out that the completion of Fox Run Boulevard will require an approved road plan, may not necessarily require a full site plan, but both of these documents are very detailed engineering drawings. The completion of Fox Run Boulevard, the conceptual road design plans for the unbuilt section of Fox Run Boulevard are currently under review. So I showed you these. And then you can see here it's currently forested. So we're going to talk about trees in a second. So this is the first of 2 sheets that will show you on the grading plan. It wouldn't all fit on one. This is a portion of the project in question that includes the Fox Run Boulevard right-of-way and then 3 affected parcels. One is owned by the Board of County Commissioners, one is owned by the Board of Education, and one is owned by Bargo LLC. The Board of County Commissioners has already gotten the necessary permissions from the other 2 landowners to grade on their property. So this was sent to the environmental planner, AKA me, to review, and this was the feedback that I came up with. So there is no FEMA 100-year floodplain located on this site or anywhere near this site. There are slopes greater than 25% within proximity to the proposed grading. Those would be the areas that are dark gray that you see on the plan. None of these steep slopes would be impacted with the proposed grading permit application, except for a small portion of slopes that were created during the construction of the existing intersection between Fox Run Boulevard and Chesapeake Boulevard. There are no wetland streams or associated buffers within the proposed limits of work. There are, however, some wetland and stream buffers in proximity to the project, mainly to the north of the LOD that you see in yellow. Sediment and erosion control measures to protect water quality are required to be in place to pass inspection. This project must meet forest conservation requirements as it is larger than 40,000 square feet. A forest stand delineation was prepared for Magnolia Ridge that includes the proposed limits of work for this project, and that's currently under review. There are both specimen and monument trees within proximity to the proposed grading. A specimen tree is anything that is 30 inches in diameter, measured 4.5 feet off the ground. A monument tree is something that's regulated within the Prince Frederick Town Center, and those are 24 inches and greater, measured at that same height from the ground. DPW has applied for 2 variances from the Board of Appeals to remove any affected specimen or monument trees, and that was heard at this morning's Board of Appeals hearing. The Calvert County zoning ordinance allows for forest conservation requirements to be phased and addressed on a lot-by-lot basis or for the property as a whole. Forest conservation requirements for parcels 549 and 863, which are both owned by county commissioners, as well as for parcel 4, which is owned by the Board of Election, have already been satisfied when those parcels were being developed. No recorded forest retention areas will be impacted by this project. Forest conservation plans for both this portion of the Fox Run Boulevard right-of-way and for Magnolia Ridge would have to be approved prior to final road plan and final site plan approval. And then this is kind of the other half of the project area that wouldn't fit on the first sheet. And it shows you a little bit more of the piece that Bargo owns, which is the piece kind of below the road, and then the water tower parcel that has already met its forest conservation requirements. Based upon review, the staff has determined the proposed grading activity will have no direct adverse impacts on the protection of adjacent natural features as long as the submitted grading plan is followed. There appear to be no outstanding environmental issues associated with this proposal that would require additional analysis prior to road plan approval. The staff recommend that the Planning Commission grant the applicant's request for an exception allowed under the Prince Frederick Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 1, Section A, for the issuance of a grading permit prior to the conditions, prior to site plan approval, with the conditions that are listed in the memo that is attached. Again, the applicant has already done number 4, which is pursue the variances for Board of Appeals for specimen and monument trees. So regarding this grading permit application for the future Fox Run Boulevard connection, the Planning Commission may consider one of the following options: approval with the recommended conditions that are in that memo, approval with modification to the recommended conditions, deferral if the Planning Commission requires additional information, or project denial, which would require the applicant to make significant design changes and resubmit to Planning and Zoning for agency review prior to coming back to the Planning Commission. If there are any questions, I'm here to answer, as well as a couple people from DPW who are working on this project.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The memo states that that there's an immediate need for the fill material that will come from the site. What does that need?
JR or Jason would be better to answer that than me.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Jason Levitt. I'm a project engineer with Department of Public Works Capital Projects. That's a good question, Mr. Freeland. There are actually a few projects that are currently underway that require fill dirt. One example is the ravine that was fixed over at Simmons Ridge. There was approximately 250 yards, or 250 cubic yards of fill that was required for that. The Senior Pines situation, as I'm sure Mr. Estes is familiar, is going to require a significant amount of fill dirt, along with other construction projects like the administration building and things like that. So.
And how much fill dirt are you proposing to take away?
So that's a difficult question to answer at this point. According to the preliminary analysis that I did, there's in the neighborhood of like 35,000 cubic yards that need to be removed for the grading to be done on this project. But that's dependent on the quality of the dirt also, and the quality of the dirt required for each of the particular activities that it's, earmarked for. Because there's select fill required for certain activities, and honestly, we don't know yet what the quality of this dirt is or whether it can be used for all of the activities. But 35,000 is the cut number. There's approximately, I think, 19,000 cubic yards of fill required for this plan. But like I said, until we determine the quality of the fill, we won't know whether we can actually apply it to the project or not.
So Jason, you haven't actually done any geo-probing, you're just simply using soil maps to...
I'm simply using AutoCAD to generate the numbers for the volumes. So we have not done any geotech yet. It's my understanding that that's done a little bit further down the line once we actually get machinery in the dirt, and we can kind of see and get an idea, and we have geotechs on calls, that's their purpose, to perform that soil testing to determine the suitability.
So one of the problems that I have this evening on the capital project worksheet, the last sentence says the remaining section of this road that we're talking about this evening, the remaining section is dependent on the Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan update. And unless I slept through it, we haven't updated that Prince Frederick Town Center Master Plan.
So technically, this grading permit is not associated with the Fox Run Boulevard road plans itself. There is a corollary benefit, but this grading permit the main intent is to go and retrieve dirt. I understand your point.
I like your answer.
Hey, thank you.
I don't necessarily agree with you, but I like your answer. Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
So Jason, while you're here, the main objective is to get dirt.
Yes, sir.
But we don't know if that dirt's any good.
I mean, you don't really know that for sure until you get in,
Right.
to the job itself, correct?
So what do we do with the dirt if it's no good?
That's a good question.
You're leaving that pile right there.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, JR could probably speak to that.
JR's the expert on bad dirt.
J.R. Cosgrove, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Takes a farmer, doesn't it?
So, we have multiple projects, as Jason stated, that we can use the excess fill dirt on. One, Calvert Pines. Now, the washout behind Calvert Pine requires certain dirt in certain locations, and then you can use bad dirt in other locations. And when we say bad dirt, it's not necessarily bad. It could be a clay material that you can't necessarily want to use under building a road. So when Jason referenced, there's 19,000 yards of fill that need it for, let's just say, to build Fox Run Boulevard. If the soil doesn't meet the qualifications for compaction rates underneath the road, we can't use it for that, but we can use it outside of the road beds, such as a shoulder on fill slopes and so forth. And believe it or not, we come across a lot of those throughout the county with erosion jobs. We got to fix it in the culverts. The one he mentioned, local, where he talked, I think it's like 250 yards, is actually 250 truckloads, and each truckload holds 20 yards. So we have a lot of large erosion projects that keep appearing that we have to maintain or fix throughout the county. So we need a more or less a stockpile location where we can find dirt, whether it's good or bad, that meets all our needs. It's twofold. We can excavate it out of here and haul it to the site cheaper than we can pay somebody to bring the soil in. Because if we pay them to bring it in, not only are we paying for trucking, we're also paying for the material on the truck. This is our project. All we're doing is paying for the trucking, not necessarily the material. So that's the ultimate goal.
And how much is dirt per truck?
Depends on the material you're buying. If you're buying like recycled concrete,
well, you would give me the bad dirt price, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Bad dirt is fairly low.
Okay, makes sense.
So, any additional questions?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Somebody wants to speak.
Yes, sir. Come on up. Yes. Just state your name for the record, please.
David Beery, Breezy Point, speaking for myself. I think there may be an embedded assumption here that this Fox Road connector is actually going to get built. Otherwise, why grade? Yeah, I get that it would be a good, less expensive source for fill dirt. But in your next agenda item, you're going to be looking at the whole eastern loop road and whether that should still be built with extensive taxpayer expense. And if phase 2 expansion goes away, do we still need that entire loop road? If it turns out that we don't, then why are we building this extension? The sole function of that extension then becomes enabling the development of the residential development that's proposed right adjacent. And it puts the county in the position of taxpayer funding what's essentially a road servicing a new residential development. So that's an awkward political situation that I'd like you to consider. And so the question really is, would it make sense to defer a decision on this project until the county and you figure out what you're going to do with the entire loop road? If you're going to go ahead with the entire loop road, then this makes sense. Otherwise, I'm not sure it does.
Thank you.
Jared Cosgrove, back again. So to kind of segue off of what the previous speaker was saying, everybody can look at this and assume that Foxford Boulevard is going to be built. We're just trying to go get the dirt in, grade it sooner so we can use the dirt for projects. Is that a false assumption? Not necessarily. This is a capital project that's been in the books for over a decade. It's been listed with Armory Road, Dares Beach, Prince Frederick Loop Road, Foxrun Boulevard. It's been in the budget book since 2011 as a capital project. Will this road benefit the land adjacent to it for development? We all can certainly say yes. However, if you look at it as a whole, you got the Calvert Middle School site, got the Calvert High School site, right adjacent to one another. You follow the transportation for the school buses. They leave the middle school site, go through Fox Run, jam up the entire center when buses come in, buses go out, turn south, head into Dares Beach Road, and go to the high school. Why are we sending our kids out on the Route 4 through all that traffic if all they have to do is travel 2,500 feet on a back road to the high school? That's the ultimate goal for developing Fox Run Boulevard and building that extension. It gives a safer path for kids to get from school to school on public transportation that we provide them. And it alleviates traffic at the intersections that we already know have issues. So if you're coming out Dares Beach Road, you can swing a right on the Foxrun Boulevard, hit the shopping center, without going out to the intersection Route 4 and Dares Beach Road. So it serves the community as a whole, not necessarily just a developer adjacent to it, which will be presented in the next presentation.
Thank you.
So can someone speak to the proposed development? Has a site plan been permitted? I see Rodney back there. Rodney, can you speak to that?
Rodney Gerst with Quality About Homes. So the entirety of Bargo, which is basically, and this started even when it was Magnolia Landing, well before we even got involved or Randy got involved, and basically an agreement that was made with the county was that this was a portion that should be built. This was the connection. With the connection, the next one we talked about was Chesapeake Boulevard extension, which kind of connected from where Chesapeake Boulevard comes out from the middle school and then runs over to the circle on Dares Beach Road. And it was kind of a weird connection. It also went across two severe wetlands, right through them, not around them, not beside them, but through them. So this was much less environmentally impactful. So when we got involved, and probably even Randy before myself got involved in the project, it was said that they would give property. So property was given. This property was originally part of the Bargo property now, but it was Magnolia Landing at the time, and they gave that property to the county. We've given right away and all to make what is probably one of the most important in my mind. I mean, if I'm living, eat and breathe here, and basically I think the connectivity within Prince Frederick. This is one of the most important pieces left between those two schools. As JR clearly explained, we're putting kids out on Route 4, we're jamming up that intersection as traffic is coming through in the afternoon. We're putting buses out there and trying to bring them out on the highway and then take them to the intersection. So if you look at it as a community, good for the entire community, this is by far one of the most important pieces left. It's actually, from budgets I've seen, it's a much less costly environment. The engineering, we've actually paid for all the engineering on the road. We actually are working with the county on a portion that we would even pay for this as a product. So we're not trying to get a free ride, and we're not trying to sneak by anybody. Anybody that knows me within the county knows that. But I think it's a vital piece. I think when we talk about things within the comprehensive plan or the zoning ordinance, it's about trying to do things that make sense. You know, I think one of the key words when you look at this, even when you read things that talk about the ordinance, and this was a map that was drawn years ago that had pencil sticks that said here's where road goes and here's where road goes, and the next one's over behind the Safeway or the Giant. You know, that's all through wetlands and all. It's never going to happen. We can start down by the bowling alley and come out by the pool. That's never going to happen. That's why the expansion can't happen, quite honestly, because the roads that follow that can't be done without exorbitant cost. This is a fairly, I know it sounds like a lot, but inexpensive $2.5–3 million road to meet a very, very high impact on relieving traffic congestion within this area, which is the center of Prince Frederick, which is one of the most important areas in the county, obviously. So with all that, like words that are in here, this plan represents a general concept. So when this pencil drawing was done, it was a general concept. So tonight, probably between both of these things, I would just say that it's really just a combination of doing something that makes a lot more sense for every side involved. The county, it's a cheaper, less expensive project. It's environmentally more sound. It's going beside wetlands, not through wetlands. The other one is going not even directly vertically across wetland. It's running kind of semi on a 45-degree angle through wetlands, which is very impactful. So overall, and then it creates, and even within the comprehensive plan, it says you're trying with your road system to create what makes sense for the development that will be around that. You're trying, and this kind of checks all those boxes off. So I think in working with Mary Beth and staff and everybody that we've worked with, Carrie, DPW, JR, and Jason Levitt extensively, it really makes a lot of sense for everybody involved. And the dirt, as you said, I can tell you from the developer builder standpoint, you can never have enough dirt because it does get very expensive. We go to sites, and for decent dirt, John, you might be dealing with 150, 200 hours a load now for something that even looks like sand, much less bank run. And you start adding those up when you have 250 loads or wherever it is, it all of a sudden you spend, a couple $100,000 just like that. So It's always a nightmare for us when we run out of dirt on our sites. We like to have plenty of dirt there, and this is kind of that kind of ongoing stockpile for the county through the duration of whenever this road is put into kind of a more heavy construction thing. So, any other questions, Wilson? Or
No, I think I'm good. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but unless I'm missing something, the action that we're asked to take this evening won't get you that road right away.
No.
The conceptual road design plans are still under review.
Yeah, the only thing that this is getting tonight is on the portion of Bargo where Chesapeake Boulevard was drawn on the previous transportation plan. It's no longer on the 2040 transportation plan. It was on the 2020 transportation plan. On that pencil drawing, it showed a line going through more where the Chesapeake Boulevard extension would have gone straight through the Bargo property and into the circle. And in that, planning had asked us to come to talk to you guys and to say, so that you've understood that process and give us your blessing that we can, it's kind of like the Foxfront Boulevard is taking the responsibility of what Chesapeake Boulevard extension would have been. It was kind of a connection, kind of north-south connection, but not on Route 4 that they try to achieve on both sides of Route 4 so that people can, once they get on, they want to go to Giant and they live down Dares Beach, they can work their way back through, go out through this, work their way to Dares Beach and never really be congesting Route 4. So these little connectors like this are just invaluable. I mean, even what went behind Walmart, years ago, when you look at what's behind there, like that gives that last piece of connectivity that lets people really stay on that side of the road and not reinvade or come out on Route 4. So definitely, I think it's a very important piece.
Thank you.
So JR, can you tell us where you are in the conceptual road plan design?
Mic check.
So the conceptual road plans have been approved conceptually for stormwater management. We're working through the site development phase now, but it's kind of tied to the whole Magnolia land or Magnolia Ridge subdivision community. So when they get that worked out and the entrance to it, we should be seeing the road plans come back in with full design. So we're a little ways out.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
Are we all done with the public also?
No, there's going to be time at the end and on the next agenda item.
Oh, I meant on this particular item.
It will be public speaking in just a moment.
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
So, just Chris Fenimore, Principal Planner with Planning and Zoning. To speak to that, right now the item that's before you is coming from the Prince Frederick Town Center zoning ordinance, and it basically says you can't get a grading permit before you have site plan or subdivision approval. And so the request is to get dirt, good, bad, or otherwise, before, in this case, it's road plan approval. There is no site plan to build a road. And that's really the only thing that this line item on the agenda is requesting. I think some of what Rodney was speaking to bleeds into the next item on the agenda. Right. Not to take away from that at all, but right now before you is the request to put the permit application be allowed to come in before road plan has approval.
And if I can jump in here too, in order to be exempted from this commission has to make a finding that, let me get the language right, protection of the natural features are satisfactorily addressed. So that's a finding we have to make in order to grant the exemption under 1A.
So Christine, could, on the next steps of the memo, I don't know if you're familiar with the memo, but the denial of the project, which would require the applicant to make substantial design changes, there are no design changes in harvesting this
You are
fill
correct.
material, right?
As JR noted before, there are conceptual road plans that with stormwater management, it has to be done in 3 steps, whether it's road plans or site development. And so formal road plans have not been submitted that I'm aware of. Colleen would be a reviewer on those as the environmental planner and development review. So to answer your question, I've not seen a formal road plan design. At this point, they're simply asking to be able to retrieve dirt before that road design is approved. That's not saying that site plan, subdivision, or road plans don't have to be done. It's simply saying if you meet certain criteria in the town center ordinance, and John spoke to the one that they're requesting, and that we've put in the memo, that they can move forward with a permit before they have road plan approval. They still need to get road plan approval.
This just allows them to pull the permit prior to approval.
Absolutely.
So they can go
Correct.
apply for the grading permit.
Correct. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
But it just confused me more. Sorry. If the road has to be permitted before the dirt is actually taken away, is this just a paperwork thing, or will the dirt be removed now? This is what, now I'm confused.
Well, no one can remove any dirt of this size without a grading permit. Anytime you're moving, is it 100 cubic yards? 100 cubic yards. Or 5,000 square feet of dirt, you have to get a grading permit. That's required by the state of Maryland, sediment erosion control, all that good stuff. They're simply asking to be able to do that before they have, in this case, road plan engineering approval. Road engineering plan approval, and that's not just by engineering. There are several agencies that review road engineering plans. Similar to a site plan that comes before you, it's engineering plans for that road. It includes stormwater, sediment erosion controls. They have to address environmental features, of course, transportation, and should the road go there in the first place comes up before, we're looking at that level of detail. But they're just simply asking to be able to get that grading permit application submitted before final road plan, engineering plan approval. Does that answer your question?
But not take the dirt.
You're gonna
We are gonna take the dirt. Thank you, JR. Okay, that's where, now, here's my follow-up question, though.
I'm not an engineer, but I would assume that if they're applying for a grading permit and pulling a grading permit, they're going to do something with the dirt.
Right. Now, JR, I understand what you're doing with the dirt. What happens with the hole that the dirt came out of while we're waiting for the road, which could be, I don't know, your guess would be better than mine. How long down the road is this?
So the plan that you see on the screen in front of you basically grades out the road to a sub-base grade. So there won't be a hole. It'll be a clear path that you could drive on if it's not blocked
An
off.
unfinished road, yeah.
Correct. I mean, it'll be an old dirt road, the trees will be removed. It'll be graded out as if there was a road there, stabilized and put grass on it. If the road plans aren't done and construction move forward by the time we're ready for it.
So it'll be stabilized with grass
Correct.
replaced?
Yeah, it's not gonna be, you're not gonna see a big hole.
Okay.
And like they said, the point of this is, it's kind of an odd situation, and you all probably don't see this much because it's a road.
Right.
That needs a grading permit for us to go in and grade before any subdivision approval, because this kind of isn't tied to a subdivision right now. It was tied to a subdivision, what was Magnolia Landing, but that's been since, I believe, abandoned. So at that point in time, when that right-of-way was created, it was tied to a subdivision, and it had approval, but that approval was no more. So now we have a right-of-way that the county owns, and we would like to go in and remove soil from it so we can use for other projects, but the town center ordinance says we can't do that without your permission because we don't have an approved site plan or subdivision. Here we are. We just need you all to tell us it's okay for us to get a grading permit so we can move forward, more or less. I mean, that pretty much sums it up.
It's now as clear as mud, so we can move on.
I'm sure.
And I'm just to
Thank
add
you.
to what JR said, sorry. There is a stormwater management feature at the top of the plan that's on the screen, so it's not like they're gonna leave a big pit that's gonna be mud. It, like he said, will be, it's almost like the first step they would do to build the road anyway. It's just, we're gonna take the dirt, we'll come back to building the road when they get me the plans to review and we come back to building the road.
But there'll be a stabilized road foundation left behind.
Yes.
thumbs up. Okay. Right.
And just to add to the conversation, I believe the background behind that being included in the town center ordinance to begin with is so you can't just go pull grading permits, mass grade a site, and then it sits.
Like the county services plaza?
Like the what?
County services plaza.
I'm not gonna touch that one. And it's been in the town center ordinance for years. It predates me. I was in Colleen's position before her, so I've presented a couple of these in my tenure, but not many. It doesn't come up a whole lot that they need or want to grade before they have a plan approval. But the logic is that you have a plan and then you go build something. And I think the inclusion in the town center ordinance is to have that plan before you go moving dirt around is all.
All right. Thank you, Christine.
Where we are now.
Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, regarding grading permit G7756, recommend approval subject to conditions under Chapter 1A, numbers 1 through 4.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan. Do I have a second?
Maria.
Oh,
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry.
The first thing we have to, according to the ordinance, we have to make a finding that protection of natural features have been satisfactorily addressed, and we don't actually approve the grading permit. All we're approving is
The application of the permit.
to allow them to apply for it.
Application.
So,
Excuse me, Caroline Sunderland, Deputy Director of Planning. You are approving, you're giving them an exemption from having to go to site plan approval prior to the grade. That's where your authority lies. It's not in allowing the, approving your grading plans or the grading permit. It is to allow them to proceed with that application without having site
Site plan approval.
Okay, I'll say it that way then. Madam Chair, regarding G7756, approving the exemption to have to go for
Site plan approval.
site plan approval and finding that all of the environmental features have been met. Does that work?
perfect.
Thank you.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Commissioner Williams. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. Next on the agenda is item 8E, Prince Frederick East Loop Road regarding roadway interpretation. I will start with the memo from staff. A little bit of background, the county is currently reviewing plans for 2 proposed residential development projects to be located on the south side of Fox Run Boulevard between Dares Beach Road and existing Chesapeake Boulevard. This section of Fox Run Boulevard is currently unbuilt except for a small segment that extends off of Dares Beach Road that serves as an entrance to Calvert High School. The proposed residential development projects are known as Magnolia Ridge. It is currently under review with staff under Concept SPR, at Cspr 142742. It's consisting of 164 townhouses and 96 apartments. And then on the adjacent parcel, Magnolia Ridge, it's also under a concept plan, Concept Cspr 142828, and that's consisting of 79 townhouses. Both projects are under the same ownership and being designed by Barrett and Associates, LLC. The adopted Prince Frederick zoning ordinance, Chapter 2, Travelways zoning ordinance 3, Section 3, includes an illustration with the subcaption, Approved Road System Map as amended by SAJ to include future overpasses, if you see the attached page to the memo. Based upon the layout, one option for the loop road alignment includes extending Chesapeake Boulevard south of Fox Run Boulevard to Dares Beach Road. The design and construction of Chesapeake Boulevard South, however, would be difficult since it would require extensive grading of moderate to steep slopes and most likely involve 2 or more stream crossings. Another option for the loop road alignment would be the completion of Fox Run Boulevard to Dares Beach Road as currently platted. This option would bring Fox Run Boulevard in alignment with the intersection of Dares Beach Road at Fairground Road. On behalf of their client, Barrett and Associates is seeking a determination from the Planning Commission that the second option, the completion of Fox Run Boulevard to Dares Beach Road at the intersection with Fairground Road, best realizes the intent and goals as set forth in the county's comprehensive plan, Prince Frederick Master Plan, and zoning ordinance, and the 2040 transportation plan. Staff recommendations, and outlined in this under discussions, are the actual requirements and that are stated in the comprehensive plan, the Prince Frederick Master Plan and zoning ordinance, and the transportation plan. So staff recommendations on this would be, staff recommends that the Planning Commission review and consider the proposed request for intent and consistency with the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, Prince Frederick Master Plan and zoning ordinance, and the 2040 Transportation Plan. And with that, tonight we have Tony Alexa from Barrett and Associates, and we have Rodney Gertz from Quality Built Homes, and they will be presenting their case.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Good evening, Commissioner, staff. I can't figure out whether or not I got a good setup with the last one or if all the thunder was stolen out from underneath me, but you know, we're here to discuss what is the Eastern Loop Road through Prince Frederick and its consistency with the zoning ordinance master plan and transportation plans. If you could start with the next slide.
Should be able to use the clicker there on the table.
Thank you. So we are here to solicit the Planning Commission's, you know, interpretation of whether or not this proposal of completing Fox Run Boulevard is consistent with the Loop Road expansion on the east side of Prince Frederick. Everyone's familiar with Prince Frederick Boulevard being the West Loop Road, and its intention there is to basically alleviate traffic off of 2 and 4 and provide ways for people to get around town without having to use the main thoroughfares. So the approach that we took was that we looked at each of these 3 documents that are up on the slide right now to see what the main points were from those documents and whether or not this proposal would be consistent with them. So the bullets that you're seeing on this slide are actually direct quotes from the master plan and zoning ordinance. And it basically is the goals and what it is intended to be the Eastern Loop Road here, and actually both loop roads, but particularly the Eastern Loop Road. With the master plan, it was actually, I guess, envisioned at one time that that extension would actually be Armory Road, extending all the way north and providing access to the hospital. Some of the key points here is that, you know, the idea that you're protecting environmentally sensitive areas, and that it was a general concept, right, is that there wasn't detailed engineering plans that went along with it, and that it really needed to be consistent with, right? It didn't spell out this has to be the alignment, it just wanted it to be consistent with the intent of the alignment. So each of the individual slides that go on from there, we kind of looked at those main points and whether or not the proposals that were within the master plan or within the transportation plans met those. So the first is, yes, is absolutely extending Armory Road all the way through the shopping center would provide access to the hospital. Kind of takes me back to when we presented Lusby Parkway, Commissioner Toohey, and you said that it went right through the middle of the produce section. Yeah. I don't think it really makes sense to go through the middle of a shopping center to provide that access. So it does retain trees and stream valleys and sensitive steep slopes because you're going over existing paved areas, but it doesn't really kind of align with what you would think a detailed engineering or detailed traffic study would say as far as it providing some relief without creating more congestion in another place of town. So the last item there is being new development shall be consistent with that roadmap. I believe is when the master plan and zoning ordinance were adopted, is Calvert Middle School was still there on the corner, is that the town center's kind of changed shape and direction over that time, including moving the middle school back closer to the high school, which was touched on in the last presentation of why the completion of Fox Run Boulevard makes so much sense. So, you know, I don't see this being consistent with future development. It's actually taking it through existing development. The 2010 transportation plan, which I believe was adopted in 1997, gets into these bullet points of what the idea was, and it included this map here, which showed kind of an extension. It's hard to read, but showed the extension from the roundabout, which is at Dares Beach Road and Armory Road now, through the Bargo property, through where the middle school would be today, and then looping around the hospital and connecting back to it. You know, the idea here is that it, you know, provides efficient circulation, it protects the environment, you know, is that the cost of building these roads would be minimized, both social and economic costs of that, and then it, you know, meets the objectives while, you know, again, minimizing costs to the public as well as to private development. We talked about the new developments being consistent with this. I think that's changed over time. I don't think this alignment is still consistent with that. And I don't think that this really is the most efficient circulation when you take into account the large nodes of traffic that are coming out of the two schools themselves. So the last, you know, to summarize this one altogether, I don't feel like it hits on any of the points that was really intended for this roadway. This is a overlay of the proposed alignment coming from the roundabout connecting to where Chesapeake Boulevard terminates today. It goes right over a stream and what is also wetlands that are there. There's also an elevation difference about 30 or 40 feet that you'd have to do. So when the last presentation talked about the amount of fill dirt that you would need in order to make this happen, that is a very realistic thing for this project, is you would have to generate so much dirt on the order of magnitude of 50 or 60,000 cubic yards of dirt that you'd be trucking and bringing in here to fill in a wetland and a stream. And I don't really think that that makes sense with this alignment. Obviously, that cost to bring in all that dirt, make that connection, go through environmentally sensitive land is very costly, both social and and economically. Kind of touched on all of these again. You know, this is a map that overlays the road alignment with steep slopes. It's going through probably one of the most sensitive areas through this side of Prince Frederick as far as the slopes and the natural wetlands and stream that are there. And I don't really believe at any point this was really looked at from an engineering study as far as the alignment that we talked about. The vertical elevation difference that you have to make up and the quantity of dirt that it would take is just something that you would normally stay away from with an engineering study. So the 2020 transportation plan, that's actually incorrect. It's the 2040. It's the projection out through 2040 that they're working on right now, or that was actually adopted. Is that correct, Ms. Wallace?
Yes.
Thank you. So, you know, again, the main goal here is that the road improvements help relieve pressure out on 2 and 4. And then it takes into consideration what can be reasonably expected to be constructed. As these projects do take a long time, and there's a lot of considerations, as you've seen, that go into them. So, you know, trying to make this connection as soon as possible to provide that benefit between traveling between schools and taking off pressure off the Dares Beach intersection there, I think is pretty important. And that was noted in the transportation plan and really got into, you know, why this should be done as part of this project. It does, you know, the proposal that is in the 2040 transportation plan does extend the loop road along as the alignment is that you're seeing here, that provides the connectivity from the heart of Prince Frederick here up to the hospital at some point. It does retain those trees and those steep slopes and those the environmentally sensitive areas that are there on the Bargo property, and it is consistent with the development that's been going on in Prince Frederick, both already that's been completed and what is also proposed. It provides efficient circulation, as we talked about, going back and forth from the schools. It protects the natural environment. You know, it really checked all the boxes of what we were looking to do with looking at all 3 different resources and what is the plan of it. This is the actual, comes from the 2040 transportation plan, or the master plan update. the draft master plan update. So this already shows what the vision is with the next amendment of the master plan. So our proposal is, we believe is consistent with the key points of the current master plan and the transportation plan, as well as the upcoming master plan update. We're just out in front of the ball a little bit here with the request to complete this connection. And that is it.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Whose property would the proposed road that goes from the circle at Dares Beach, it cuts behind the Armory, impact? Who are the property owners?
All of that property is.
It's all Bargo, it's all Bargo property. Okay. Now, does that follow the railroad bed?
No, it does not, sir. The railroad bed runs behind the self-storage facilities that are there and behind the Armory, and then connects back out to.
So it's east of the railroad bed?
Yes, sir.
I'm getting to that. 1 second. Make sure anybody else up here has any comments or discussion? Sir, come on up. Just state your name again for the record, please.
I'm Bob Estes still, and the slide 9, could you go to that, please? Thank you, that's helpful. I don't have an ecological problem with 4, although I am a little surprised that this idea that it helps the schools, I didn't see that in any of the 7 documents. So that's kind of interesting. Perhaps that makes sense. I don't know if the schools asked for it or not, but I could see that conceptually it sounds good, but is it the only solution? Who knows? That segment 3 goes through a very wide, ecologically sensitive floodplain that's had water problems in the past. There is a steel dam structure, I don't know what that's called exactly, but with a tree actually stuck on the top of it, and it's probably about 8 foot tall. There's a lot of elevation change in there. I don't know how you do that without affecting that headwater to Hunting Creek. And segment 2 there also crosses a fairly significant ravine. I tried it once, I don't recommend it. It's difficult. I don't know that you'd fill it in with dirt or have a bridge or what you would have, but it's not as simple as it looks. I just want you all to consider that.
Thank you, sir.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, sir.
So this is just basically, we're just dealing with 4 here on this screen, so it's got nothing to do with 3 or 2. I understand Bob's comments and surely agree with him 100%. That section of the road, if it ever is built, is much more environmentally sensitive. This portion, even building the section we're talking about, still alleviates a great amount of traffic off of the mid-Prince Frederick, Dares Beach intersection, Route 4 light, school buses not entering Route 4 to get back on. So they're just completely separate. I agree there's other pieces that just because they're drawn on a map, that's kind of what happened. That's why we're here. It was a pencil sketch from 1997 that showed roads going anywhere and took none of that into consideration, including the environment. And there's some of them that absolutely should never get built just for environmental reasons, if nothing else. So, yeah, I agree with him on 3 and 2.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just one additional comment, and that is, I
State your
get the
name,
school
please.
bus, I'm sorry, David Beery, Breezy Point, speaking for myself. I get the school bus argument, and it's a powerful one to try and keep those maximum extent possible off Route 24. As far as overall traffic abatement, the issue then is once these large residential developments go in with the amount of additional traffic that they generate, is there a net increase or decrease even if this extension is built? That would require a traffic impact study, which has not yet been done. So trying to figure out what the net traffic trade-offs are as far as congestion abatement, I think needs to wait for the site plan process and the traffic impact study. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, the traffic impact studies have been done and have been reviewed by DPW. The project shows no issues even before we put route the number 4 in. We would be okay to move forward. We could have designed our project with 2 alternative accesses. I could have gone right to Armory Road and not done anything. We're doing this for what we think is the overall betterment for the community as a whole, that we have a better location for this connecting road. We're building a piece of that road. We're paying, I should say. I'm paying him. I don't know why I say we're paying. We're paying for the engineering, and actually we're working out another agreement with the county that will be paying for a portion of the road as well. So we could have gone a different route, not even gotten this deep into the process. So we're coming here as we've been working with staff and county for 2 years on this. This isn't because that old stick drawing was in the current zoning ordinance or comprehensive plan zoning ordinance. That stick drawing from the old transportation plan that's no longer the current transportation plan. That's why we had to get your blessing to move forward with Mary Beth wanted that blessing from you to move forward. In the new transportation plan, it doesn't even show the Chesapeake Boulevard extension anymore. It shows the Fox Run Boulevard. I think everybody's come to consensus with all of staff, DPW, planning and zoning, everybody within the county, that it makes much more economical sense for everybody involved, but definitely the county, to make that connection. And I think I would add the school bus. I would add anybody that lives on Dares Beach Road. There's lots of people that benefit. It's a community benefit as well as to build that section of Fox Run Boulevard. That extension, I think, is the most cost effective and the best connection you would get in that area. And that's kind of what our goal is when we enter any area. I agree with Bob to do number 3 up there, going behind the giant building and going across the major wetland. Not sure that makes sense, but this one definitely makes sense to accomplish the county's goals from the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance.
Will State Highway require a light at 402 in Fox Run?
No. The traffic studies are done. That's not required. And you're going to get traffic now going both ways. You're going to get a distribution of traffic that you're not going to get if we did go to Armory Road, which we could, and could have gone out by the high school. We could have had those 2 accesses, and that would have met. Well, then you have a lot more, funneling into less area. Everybody's, with people going out and making that left on Fox Run Boulevard with the traffic studies, it actually helps improve the entire situation. Even the high school area will improve because not everybody's coming in from Dares Beach. Some people are coming from Fox Run Boulevard. So, just from my experience as a citizen, not as a developer, it is going to be a very beneficial piece of road for the county. As we saw some of the other little pieces that got added on the west side, that, boy, it made a big difference when they finally got to those pieces. And I think this would be the same result for everybody.
Thank you.
And Commissioners, just for clarification, where Fox Run crosses and starts Chesapeake Boulevard, a portion of that is owned by the county also.
Thank you.
Just for clarification.
Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. I'm Leonard Souza. I'm a director with Calvert Citizens United. And I'd like to make a comment about the statement that was just made that a traffic study was done. Between 2016 and 2020, Calvert County grew by a large number of residences in the county. There was a real surge of residential growth during that point. The last study that was done on highways was done in 2017, as the consultant testified several weeks ago. I don't know whether he came before you all, but he certainly came before the BOCC. So any study that is relying on previous studies is going to be flawed simply because there was population growth in the county that is resulting in an increased level of highway congestion. I suggest that that be kept in mind, and that we can't rely on previously done studies until a new one is done to see what the latest level of congestion is. I don't know technically what a C or D or E or F is as far as the difference in traffic. I just know the times that I've been on 2 and 4, the traffic has been getting worse and worse and worse. I think that we need to have the state take another look at highway congestion in the area.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I ask a question of the Speaker?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Souza? You mentioned that there was significant growth from 2016 to 2021 in Calvert County?
Through 2020, sir, yes.
Through 2020, okay. What number was that? What is the significant growth that occurred?
The growth that occurred when the plan was done, when the comprehensive plan was done in 2014, the county projected and you all approved a growth rate of roughly an average annual rate of 113 residential units a year. But starting in 2016, Planning and Zoning shows data that the average annual growth rate in the county was 450 residences a year for 5 years. So that is the growth that I saw in the county per the data that Planning and Zoning has.
Okay. It doesn't seem to line up with the census information that we received here earlier, which would indicate that we only had in human bodies, not in housing units, but in human bodies, we only averaged about less than 0.5% growth per year, according to the census data.
Well, sir, you can rely on the U.S. Census numbers if you want, or you can rely on the county data as to the number of residences approved. I don't have it with me, but I can come up with a proof to show you what the number of new residences approved in the county between 2016 and 2020 was, and that's at a much higher rate than what your annual plan projected. This body has not been observing your own plan. I have never heard anybody during any of these hearings say, oh, these are the developments that we're looking to. How does that comply with what the county's plan was when it was set in 2014? You're going to be reaching the number of residences in the county in the next year or two that you had set initially to be reached in 2040. So that is the rate of growth that I'm looking at, and that's based on county data.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I guess I just wanted to kind of bring it back to the subject. Is absolutely the development that will happen on the Bargo property will go through all the appropriate channels with traffic impact studies and all the development review that goes along with it. What we're here today to ask is basically, is the completion of Fox Run Boulevard and this easterly loop road the best way to realize the goals of the transportation plan as well as the comprehensive plan and the master plan? And we believe it does. I mean, it makes a connection that alleviates traffic off of 2 and 4, protects environmentally sensitive areas, and all the other bullet points that we went through. With development of the projects, which will be brought back to you at some point here as well, that will all be part of that discussion then.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I did have a hand up virtually online.
Okay.
Mr. Cormier, did you wish to speak, sir?
Hi, good evening again, Commissioners. My name is Joseph Cormier. I do want to speak in favor of this Fox Run extension. It is going to help alleviate traffic, not just on a normal bus day, but anybody who was trying to get into Calvert Middle School during the bus strike, and I hope we never have one of those again. It was absolutely a nightmare twice a day. And it's also going to help alleviate traffic coming out of Calvert High School after the football games and other large sporting events that they have up there. So getting this extension, from Calvert High School to Calvert Middle School is a net positive for our county. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe we're looking for a motion, just to clarify, that finds the proposed request consistent with the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, the Prince Frederick Master Plan and Zoning Ordinance, and the 2040 Transportation Plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that we find this consistent with the 2019 Comprehensive Plan, the current Prince Frederick Master Plan and Zoning Ordinance, and the 2040 Transportation Plan.
Right, I have a motion made by Commissioner Freeland. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kernan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have item 8F, Planning Commission proposed 2023 annual regular meeting schedule. There is a memo from Becky Parkinson. The background, Planning Commission regular meetings are primarily held on the third Wednesday of each month. If a holiday falls within a close to the third Wednesday meeting week, the meeting may be rescheduled accordingly. For the year 2023, regular meetings in January through November are proposed to be held on the third Wednesday of each month. Staff recommends December's meeting be scheduled on the second Wednesday due to the holiday season. If you see the attached proposed list. As of this writing, meetings will be held hybrid unless otherwise designated. In person at 901 Dares Beach Road, Prince Frederick, via Zoom if participating, see individual agenda. The live stream viewing will be held via the county website on Meetings on Demand. Special meetings are scheduled as needed and usually held on the fourth Wednesday of the month to allow for, but not necessarily limited to, if additional time is needed from regular meetings, joint public hearings with the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission public hearings, and/or work sessions. Each year, the Planning Commission reviews for action the proposed listing regarding the Planning Commission's regular meetings scheduled for upcoming year. Discussion. Questions or comments from the Planning Commission? Any comments or questions? So our conclusion and recommendation that staff seeks Planning Commission's approval and/or amendments to the attached proposed 2023 Planning Commission regular meeting schedule.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the 2023 Planning Commission regular meeting schedule.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan, a second by Commissioner Freeland. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 9, items of interest, site plan and subdivision application list. This list is for informational purposes only. No action is required. Are there any questions that the Planning Commission has of staff?
Commissioners, any discussion? No, hearing none.
Next on the agenda is item 10, which is public comment. At this time, we will open the meeting up for public comment. According to the Calvert County Ordinance number 5121, the Planning Commission Chair will first request comments from the attending in person and then from those attending virtually. Speakers, whether in person or participating by phone or virtually, will be limited to 2 minutes as individuals and 5 minutes if they are designated to represent a group or organization. Right now, we'll ask if there are any in-person speakers who would like to speak. Is there anyone by Zoom?
Yes, Mr. Cormier has his hand up.
All right.
Mr. Cormier, you may unmute.
Good evening one more time, commissioners and staff. I just want to thank all the staff that worked on these presentations this evening. We really do have the best staff here in Calvert County. I appreciate everyone being available for questions through social media. And when I call up there, it really is a great democracy in action to have this work. Just want to remind everyone to register to vote and get your vote in. And Friday at the Harry Elizabeth Brown Center, we're going to be having a community resource fair for special education. We hope everybody stops by 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more speakers?
Not online, no.
Okay, if there are no speakers, we'll move to item 11, which will be adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kernan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tui. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are now adjourned. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful evening.